year is 1973. The frightening images of The Exorcist haunt movie theaters for the first time. The United States ends its involvement in the Vietnam War with the signing of the Paris Peace Accords. And President Nixon, facing the consequences of the Watergate scandal, utters the infamous words on national television,
"Well, I'm not a crook. I've earned everything I've got."
Far away from the commotion of Washington, D.C. and the outside world, a small team of researchers works together to try to uncover the truth of the strange phenomena happening around them. Stan Gordon and his recently formed Westmoreland County UFO Study Group were following reports of Sasquatch and UFOs in Pennsylvania, but nothing could prepare them for what was coming.
It was lucky that we are already organized, because 1973 comes around, and here we have first the largest UFO wave ever documented, with hundreds and hundreds of UFO sightings throughout the state of Pennsylvania. It started January 1st, continued to the last day of the year. And many of these were not lights in the sky. These were large structured objects low to the ground. We had reports of these things over major highways on the Pennsylvania Turnpike, hovering over cars. We had landing reports. I mean, it was amazing in itself. But then in the summer of '73, we had the biggest outbreak of Bigfoot sightings ever documented. And that went on to 1974. And many of those Bigfoot sightings were in daylight. And many of them were at very, very close range. I mean, we're talking 5, 10, 15, 20 feet away from some witnesses. And in some cases, there was more than one creature seen together, which is very interesting. But in a lot of those cases back then, there was some type of physical evidence at the scene. And during that time, we made casts of a number of different footprints and tracks were found. And that's also the time when we began to find that there may be a lot more to the Bigfoot mystery and UFO phenomena than any of us had ever expected.
Pennsylvania in 1973 seemed to act as a giant magnet for all the strangeness in the world, combining phenomena in jarring, unthinkable variations.
When this all began in the summer of '73, and all these Bigfoot reports are coming in, we thought that we're dealing with an unknown animal. Well, our teams get out to some of these locations, and you see these large footprints, big stride between them. They go for quite a distance in some cases, and then they abruptly stop when there should have been more tracks. And there's no way under the conditions we found it could have been fabricated. And then it happened in the snow. And it continues to happen even more recent years, okay? So that opened up our eyes, like something very strange is going on here. Then it got even stranger. Then we were getting reports from the public, and we're interviewing these people, and these people were shaken. They can't believe what they saw. People are telling us that they see this huge hair-covered creature. They're looking at it, it physically vanishes, and seconds later reappears at another location not far away. Then we began to hear people saying, well, this thing looks solid, this thing would suddenly appear out of nowhere and disappear. In some cases, they move very fast across the road, but people were saying they appear to be floating or gliding above the roadway. When I first began to notice this was actually 1972. In a wooded location a few miles outside of Greensburg, where I happen to live, I began to get reports from independent residents who live along this wooded area. Nothing had ever happened before. Then suddenly they're calling me about hearing these strange screams and cries and howls. Something heavy bipedal walking in the woods. A large, broad-shouldered creature is seen chasing dogs. But they're also reporting strange footprints being found around the properties, UFOs, and these very small little spheres of light low to the ground, very close to their homes and near the bushes. That really caught my attention because it was very unusual, and that was very, very intriguing. So then the next year, we had this massive outbreak with UFOs and Bigfoot, and that's when we began to come across these amazing cases with UFOs and Bigfoot seen together at the same time and place. There was one case, for example, north of Pittsburgh during '73. Witnesses see this 7-foot, 8-foot tall Bigfoot with white hair. It's running across the road, but in one of its hands is carrying a small ball of light. And a short time later, this object comes across the sky and projects a beam of light down into the woods where the creature ran into.
There were occasionally a smattering of white Bigfoot activities happened in the early 2000s, I think near Waynesboro, and some other sightings, I think in '73, but nothing that's you can keep pounding on or like prove that it's still in existence. Yesterday I just learned of a creature they called the Old Man down near Jumonville, and it was potentially an older Bigfoot, but it was also missing a digit, which was kind of cool. But its hair was lighter and it was older, a little bit bigger. It was a pretty cool story. I just learned of that yesterday, so it's something I want to jump into a little bit and find out more.
That our organization has not been like really one sighting. It's been a series of 8 sightings of a white Bigfoot creature in our area, encompassing Beaver County, Lawrence County, right next door into Columbiana County. These are a white Bigfoot creature. All the characteristics of a Bigfoot, it's white. Now, it may be the heaviest concentration of white Bigfoot sightings in the country, but we've taken 8 and there's been at least 11. Mostly every sighting except one was about 7 foot tall. One of them was 4 foot tall in Cascade Park in Newcastle. The gentleman was fishing along the creek, and he's fishing there for a while, and he feels really weird, like there's something staring at him, and kind of looks over the creek, and he sees this white 4 foot tall Bigfoot looking at him and had yellow eyes. He says this was a real creature because the wind blew and the fur was blowing with the wind. He said we just stared at each other for maybe a minute and a half, and he said it just slowly just went into the forest, and he slowly backed up and got out of there because he was scared. And I have the drawing and everything of it. Another one, and it was of a white Bigfoot. It was about 7 foot tall, but this creature hopped between trees. And the kids saw this, and it was hopping really. I'm just telling you what the eyewitness report says. That's what we will do. If we say this creature was floating, if we say it disappeared, that's what's going in the report. I mean, if people don't believe in it, they can deal with it. I'm just going to put what they said, not what I said.
A lot of sightings in Ohio whenever it comes to white Bigfoot. And there are occasional sightings in Pennsylvania as well, too. I don't know if the white Bigfoot is a seasonal transition from one coat to another. It seemed it would help in camouflage in the wintertime. But the white Bigfoot that has been encountered around here in Pennsylvania is usually seen whenever there is no snow on the ground. It's just the way it appears.
Then we had that famous case up in Fayette County. So you had that multiple witness UFO landing. We had 15 people. They're observing this barn-sized red sphere in the sky about 100 feet off the ground, slowly moving downward. The object ends up on the ground in the pasture. And the older fellow of the group and 2 younger boys, they're up in the field after seeing this thing coming down. The older fellow has a .30-06 with some ammo. The object they're seeing now, it went from the sphere to being a big white dome. So like a half a sphere, bright white, about 100 feet or so in diameter. Very, very large, making this loud whining noise, illuminating the whole area. And they can't believe what they're seeing. So they're standing there, it's about 250 feet away. Their attention is drawn to this barbed wire fence. Along the barbed wire fence, you got these 2 tall hair-covered creatures, bipedal. One's about 8 feet tall, the one in front, the biggest one. The one behind is about 7 feet tall. And they're moving slowly one behind the other in their direction along the barbed wire fence. The one young boy is so frightened he runs out of the field. The other fellow starts telling the older guy, shoot him, shoot him. So he fires his first shot over their head, which was that tracer. He fires the second tracer, and when he does, the largest of the 2 creatures makes this loud whining baby crying sound, reaches out with his one hand as though to grab at that tracer, and the moment it does that, that large object suddenly vanishes and disappears. It doesn't rise from the ground, it just vanishes, the sound stops, most of the luminosity is gone, and the creatures turn around and start walking back along the barbed wire fence back towards the woods. At that point, he's firing live ammo from his .30-06 at the creatures, and I remember this fellow telling me, I'll never forget how that creature with those large glowing red eyes is just staring at me as I'm firing into it, and there's no effect on him whatsoever. Those 2 fellows went back to the vehicle, went to the farmhouse, got the family out of there, took it to a neighbor's, called the state police. When the troop arrived 45 minutes later, they went up into the field where the object was, and the trooper told me the area where the object was reportedly on the ground was self-luminescent and glowing, about 100 feet or more in diameter. He said he remembered the farm animals wouldn't go anywhere near it. This rose up off the ground, I believe about a foot, the luminosity. He thought that if he had a newspaper, he could have read the newspaper from the light coming off the glow. And that was the case. It convinced me and some of my skeptical research people that there was a lot more going on here than we understood.
The connection between Sasquatch and UFOs has always been dubious. Mired in competing theories as to what exactly these strange craft are, as well as the nature of Sasquatch, the conversation is wide open for extreme conjecture and outright ridicule.
You don't hear about it that often because, again, most UFO sightings don't have a Bigfoot connection. And most Bigfoot sightings don't have a UFO connection. The point is, these things are taking place probably a lot more commonly than a lot of people realize. A lot of people are reluctant to report just a UFO sighting or a Bigfoot encounter. And then when you get these stranger aspects to it, a lot of them are very, very reluctant to talk about it. But these are the things that I'm hearing and other researchers around the country are hearing as well.
For many people, witnessing a Sasquatch is far outside the status quo. For those who have never seen one, experiencing a sighting is interpreted as merely a trick of the imagination. For those who have, an encounter is an unfortunate step into a world of terrors and a begrudging acceptance of horrifying truths that exist just beneath the reality we know. And still, there are others who have seen things far more strange than a Sasquatch.
I think Stan took one or two where these Bigfoot would shapeshift into a Black Panther. Now we get Black Panther sightings up here too. We get mountain lion sightings, Black Panther.
I have had reports of Bigfoot being seen in proximity with the Black Panther. So I don't throw out anything that seems to be unbelievable or have a lot of woo in it, because that might have some sort of meaning in the long run. But Bigfoot being seen with these Black Panthers as if there's some sort of connotation with the two is something that's very prevalent in these Bigfoot reports. Very near here, in Ligonier, as a matter of fact, somebody had reported a Black Panther drinking out of their swimming pool. The next day they reported a Bigfoot sighting in their yard as well too. So these kind of very strange kind of connections seem to exist whenever you talk about the two. Now it could be that we're dealing with a very finite geographical area as well, and these animals just simply, cross paths every now and then. I think that could happen because they would be serving a different niche. If there is indeed a flesh and blood Bigfoot, it probably would not be occupying the same niche as a Black Panther.
I had one, 2005, October 2005 on Dairy Ridge, Chestnut Ridge. Another researcher and myself were up there for Bigfoot, and we went back deep in the woods about 3 miles, and it was, in that year, it was a drought, and all the vegetation, all the ferns and everything on the ground had died early that year. It was just as dead as it is outside now in October. We went back to an area where we had a UFO sighting back there, allegedly. It's a well-graded road. It was an old logging road. As we're traveling back, the guy who was with me, Brian, we split apart. We weren't talking. And I was off the one side of the road in just vegetation, and he was off in the ditch, and we were just walking slowly as we were heading back down this road back to the car. And as we're topping this knoll, I look down, and as I'm looking in this spot that I knew by this bear pond, but it was up on the edge of the road more than down by the pond, I see this object on the ground. First thought I was thinking a bear, because it was black. I thought it was black. And it's just laying there. Well, Brian hadn't noticed it. And as we kept taking a few more steps, this thing turned its head and looked, and it's moving. I'm like, that is not a bear, and it's not a dog. It had a head looked like a bowling ball, round head on it. And I did this like that to Brian. I got his attention because I didn't want to say nothing. And he looked at me and I said, there was a lot of chipmunk activity, ground squirrels and squirrels in activity that day, and I don't know if that's what had it up there, if it was trying to get food. Brian flagged me, let's keep walking. It took maybe 4 or 5 more steps. This thing literally sprang up, one whole thing sprang up off the ground about 2.5, 3 feet. It was as big as me. Like I said, I'm 6'2", and it looked as large as me, and that's when a tail come out from under it or behind it. It whipped like a whip, and that tail looked like it was the size of the diameter of a ball bat, and it all in one motion. It hit the ground. We watched it go down through the woods like lightning, and it looked just like the Wide World of Sports that shows those jaguars and cheetahs. And I mean, we knew it was a cat, a big cat. Well, Brian had his .40 cal. I didn't have a gun. But he said, Dwayne, you want to go down and see if we can spook it out or find anything, get its tracks or anything? I said, hey, I'm right there with you. So we get down to the location and down into the woods we go. And we went we went half a mile down into the woods until it just got so overgrown and thick, we couldn't navigate into the area anymore. We didn't see anything. Again, this was my area of interest at that time. From 2001 until this 2005 time, I was up there almost every weekend, sometimes every weekend. So it was very intriguing to me that I'm seeing this cat and I want to know why it's there. So I go back up there a couple weeks later and I'm approaching, I want to come up the mountain from the bottom. There was a trailhead at the bottom that you could come up in a place called Hillside. As I'm in the parking lot, there was another guy already there and he's getting gear out of the back of his car. We didn't say anything other than a cordial hi, how you doing, or something like that. As I put my backpack on and was getting my gear out, he had a bow. He turns and looks at me. He said, you going up on the mountain? I said, that's my plan. He said, well, my wife works at the Tribune Review. They've had 5 mountain lion reports over the last month and a half. He said, that's why I'm up here. He said, I don't see a weapon. I said, I don't have a gun. He said, well, that's why I'm telling you, be on the lookout. He said, be careful, there's a lot of ledges up here. He said, I don't want you to get hurt. I don't want you to get ambushed by a mountain lion if it is up here. I didn't tell him about the black one I saw. But again, this was a 2-week span, and by coincidence, here's this guy telling me, watch out for mountain lions after I've seen a black one, what I'm confident was a black or a dark brown one.
The idea that there being a black panther in western Pennsylvania, particularly along the Chestnut Ridge, is a report or eyewitness accounts that I get almost weekly from somebody. Now, you could talk to various biologists and they say that the black panther is impossible within the mountain lion. It's impossible for the melanin to occur as a phenotype in the mountain lion. So are we talking about a different type of animal at that point? These animals do indeed seem to be flesh and blood animals. They don't seem to have any kind of paranormal activity resonating around them whatsoever. And it's very possible that, the jaguar, which can be seen in places like Texas, and at one time had a much wider influence in the southwest of the United States, there is no reason why they could not have transplanted themselves into western Pennsylvania. That's one of the theories that I go with as an investigator.
As disconnected as the reports may seem, there may be some evidence to suggest that the phenomena emanates from a similar source.
Again, these things seem at times to be able to suddenly appear and then they're gone. They're here for a short time and then they're gone. With UFOs, you have reports for years of these large solid objects, but it'll begin to fade away and disappear, or it'll physically change from one form into another right in front of the witness's eyes, and then sometimes disappear. So you're having similarities with some UFO incidents as well as some of these cryptid cases we're hearing. Sometimes you have more than one cryptid show up in an area that has a history of these ongoing phenomena. So you asked me earlier about some of these areas that have a history of this phenomena being active. Well, back in the summer of '79, people reported seeing an unusual object fall that afternoon from the sky into a field. Soon after, odd things began to happen. They began to hear screams and cries, see small spheres of light, UFO sightings, Bigfoot sightings, and then in the years to follow, the activity got much more active during, I think, it was '81 and '82. And this series of events actually made the local news, and actually television covered it for a while. So they were not only having Bigfoot encounters, they had an outbreak of Black Panther sightings at the same time. And the Black Panther sightings are very, very intriguing. Again, with these Black Panther reports, sometimes when this phenomenon is going on in a certain location, more than one cryptid will appear. But there's one really interesting case I had from February 1983 up in Fayette County. This fella comes home from a friend's house around 1 o'clock in the morning. It's cold out. His car is overheating. He pulls into the driveway and he went in to get a bottle of antifreeze. So he comes out and starts putting antifreeze in the car, and he hears this growl behind him. He turns around and looks, and I think it was about 20 feet away, there's this pretty large black tomcat, house cat. Didn't think much about it. He goes back and he's putting more antifreeze in. A short time later, hears this much louder growl, and he turns around to look, and now that house cat has physically grown twice its size. He throws that can antifreeze at it, and he goes into the house and grabs a pistol. And he comes out a short time later, and now that big cat is walking up the driveway, up the road, which is illuminated, and now it looks like a full-size black panther, like he said you would see in a zoo, with a long body, the tail, and luminous yellow eyes growling at him. He took a shot at it. He didn't know if he hit it, but moments later, it physically vanished and disappeared right in front of him. So here's something that has turned, from something small into something larger.
There's different camps out there about what Bigfoot actually is. There are some people that say that Bigfoot is flesh and blood, that we're dealing with an uncategorized great ape, right? Or some sort of lineage from the Gigantopithecus black-eyed. That's one camp. And then there is another camp that states that Bigfoot is a supernatural creature or an extraterrestrial creature. So as a researcher, I try to take all of this into account because I don't want to throw anything away. Bigfoot shape-shifting, it's so prominent that it's hard not to address it. I've interviewed many witnesses that said that they have seen two legs running through the woods with no body attached to it, or a Bigfoot gradually kind of come into physicality. I've never heard tell of a Bigfoot shape-shifting into another creature, but the idea of it being able to blend in or vanish is something that I've heard. So
something else has turned up, and I've noticed this in more recent years. Different witnesses who were very close to Bigfoot or other cryptids, where they were very, very close, very detailed accounts, they mentioned to me that when the creatures realized that they could be seen by the human observer, they reacted startled, maybe scared, that they were able to be seen. And I think that's something very, very interesting. And there's more and more information coming in that suggests wherever we're dealing with, it's physical and non-physical both. As strange as it sounds, and it's not just from what I've learned from cases I've been involved in, but from many other research around the country, and some of this comes from around the world as well, from other cases, that these things may actually change physical form.
I will tell you this one little story that involved me that seems to suggest that something paranormal was going on. So one day we had a very bad snowstorm. I went outside just to see how bad it was. It was about 6 o'clock in the morning, new fallen snow, nobody else had been out, schools were closed, all that good stuff, so everybody's cars were still piled up. But then I noticed that in my front yard was a set of tracks. So I got closer and I noticed that these tracks were human or human-like. You could see all 5 toes, but what the strange thing was, they were the size of a child. These weren't large Bigfoot tracks. These weren't 17 or 18 inch tracks. These were about, the size of a dollar bill, very small. So I thought, this seems very strange. I'm a Bigfoot investigator, and all of a sudden there's these tracks in my yard. So I decided to find out where they came from. And they came from nowhere. In the side of my yard, there was a right track, and a little bit farther, another right track, and then a left footprint, and then a right footprint. They came up to my window, which is odd, and then they went over the hill and they vanished the exact same way. It appeared as if something had either stepped off into our world or gradually became a physical form and came up to my window, looked in, and went. But in order for that to happen, it would have to have some sort of knowledge of who I was. It doesn't seem strange that somebody that investigates this would have this kind of encounter. But I think that a lot of people do have these kind of encounters, that the people who are so into this or investigating this are getting encounters as a way to say that these things exist or some sort of proof. But what is so interesting about this particular case is I decided to investigate the woods that were very near my house, was within a few hundred yards from my house. And the next spring, I came across the exact same set of tracks. They were in the mud, the exact same size. I spoke with Stan Gordon. He said for probably the past 30 years, people have been reporting these tracks of a very diminutive, what Bigfoot or what have you. But after my investigation that spring, that area has now been posted and nobody's allowed up into that area, which I found very, very fascinating.
There have been people over the years up on the ridge and other places have told me they've seen something appear, sometimes like a swirling effect, something that people described as a portal or a doorway or something opening where they felt that theoretically the sun could come in and out. Whatever we're dealing with, it seems to have the capability to suddenly appear. It can look physically solid at times, leave evidence, and then it's gone. These things appear to be able to come and go, whatever they are.
The existence of portals has not been scientifically proven, although some credentialed researchers have hypothesized about them, and many others claim, based on their own observation, that they simply do exist. If these doorways to other realms are in fact real, could they serve as pathways for strangeness to enter the world that we sense?
There have been reports of thunderbirds, and interestingly, we had a series of thunderbird sightings in the last year. One of them was pretty interesting. This one happened between Greensburg and Latrobe, so it overlooks the ridge a few miles away. This was early morning hours. A fellow's pumping gas. This guy's very familiar with the birds of the area, the turkey vultures, the blue herons, things like that. And he says he's looking over these trees across the road, and here's this huge, dark, flying creature that he says it looks like something out of Jurassic Park. He says it looks like a stingray in the sky. It has a long tail, and he saw it flapping a couple times, its wings, I believe, but then it was just soaring out of sight. He didn't see it long, but he said whatever that thing was something that he had never seen anything that big before in the sky. And there have been other Thunderbird sightings around the state in the last year. Some were really detailed, daylight, very low level. 2 cases I can think of, one in eastern PA, one in western PA, within months, in daylight, where these huge flying creatures came down within 10 feet, turned its head and made eye contact with a witness.
We had a report come in 2003 where a hunter had claimed to have seen one moving through the woods. I didn't investigate that. I didn't know much detail about it. But following that, there was heavy snowfall up on top of the mountain. So 4 of us got in this guy's old Cherokee Chief. It was a beast. We took off and made it to the top of the mountain. No sign of any other activity, no tire treads, nobody's footprints, nothing. We were the only ones in this heavy snow. It was an 8-inch snowfall on the road, and when we got out, we were up to almost our knees in 15 inches of snow. We got out on the top peak of this mountain, which is the highest point in southwestern Pennsylvania, 2,610 feet. And we spread out looking, hoping to find any tracks or anything. We found what we think was mountain lion. We found a series of tracks as big as the palm of my hand, and they had 3.5 foot stride. And what was so good about it was, as we're following this off of the top of the mountain down to this logging road, it had a distinctive drag mark that looked like that tail that I saw in 2005. So we followed this, what looked like a mountain lion tracks, down to this old abandoned logging road. When we get down to the logging road, mysteriously the mountain lion tracks disappeared. And we're spreading out again, trying to pick them up, thinking it might have jumped in a tree or jumped off the trail. As we're doing that, we find the best Bigfoot, and I'll say they're Bigfoot, or they were a human up there with 17-inch footprints. Well, what's kind of bizarre is the logging road was, 12, 15 inches of snow. Whatever this was parallel with the road as we followed the trackway. The ice and snow had been there for several days or weeks, and it had become compact, compressed. We walked over into the side, and we only went down a couple inches, and we're all grown men. Two of the guys were pretty heavy guys, and they weren't doing any damage to the snow or ice. Whatever this was compressed the snow down to within 1 inch or 2 inches of the ground. It was easily impressions that were clean toe marks and clean footprints in snow 15 inches. And then we noticed that the stride was 4.5 feet, clean, no drag marks. It was picking its feet up and putting them 4.5 feet in where they were this way. They weren't side by side like humans walk. This was a straight trail. We followed that trackway almost 1/8 of a mile, several hundred yards. It was as clean all the way from the time we found the first track to where they finally just disappeared. They stopped. We come to an opening that was easily 30 feet clearance. No trees, nothing. And they were in that, and they just like, that thing just vaporized, just vanished. Well, we made jokes. One of the guys said, well, maybe the aliens, the UFOs came and picked it up and took it up with them. I said, well, not much else makes any sense. Where'd this thing go that we've been following? And the tracks are here. And I said, it couldn't have stepped backwards and went all the way back to where we started and not leave some kind of other indication. I tried to replicate it because I'm 6'2" again. I was the tallest guy in the group, and I could barely get a 2-foot stride, and that was me stretching as hard as I could. And I was knocking the snow down. I was dragging my toe trying to get it out of I put my foot down in its impression, and I picked my foot up and tried to move it, and I couldn't do it. Since that time, Dr. Meldrum and the military has released a spray that you can actually make a cast in the snow. Back then, we didn't have anything like that. That would have been the best castings that we probably could have ever found. They were the cleanest tracks I've ever seen.
And yet, with all the chaos that high strangeness can bring, the ridge still harbors darker secrets, hiding in plain sight.
There have been some really unusual cases over the years that I've looked at. One in particular took place on North Connellsville Street in downtown Uniontown, a very populated area with, there's a Rite Aid store right there where this happened at. And a woman was driving on North Connellsville Street heading north, and there's a elementary school on the left, and as I said, the Rite Aid on the right. As she's coming on the parking lot, she sees what she thinks is a kid or a teenager running towards her vehicle, and it hops off this high wall at the elementary school, the middle school there on the left, and starts running right in the path of her oncoming car. And she's afraid that she's going to hit this thing, but she slows down to come to almost to a stop. This thing continues in the same pathway, and she realizes at that point it's not a kid, it's something upright. She called it a werewolf, and it continued towards her, and instead of hitting the front end of her car, it seemed to go towards the back of her car, and she said she watched it in the rear view mirror leap over the trunk of her car and continue into the Rite Aid parking lot, and then running down this city street and disappeared. So she called Stan, called me, we went down and talked with her, met her in person, she took us right to the location. The only evidence we found to kind of corroborate her story is on her left rear quarter panel of the vehicle, where she said this thing jumped, was very large, fine scratch marks, almost like something that had a coarse hairbrush and kind of scraped the paint on it. And that's the only thing we found that might corroborate her story. But we went in and talked to the manager and one of the clerks there at the Rite Aid to see if maybe they had security cameras, because they did have them in the lots. And unfortunately, they were 24-hour loops, so they run, and if nothing happens, they just let them run. Nothing on film, nothing captured. They did tell us that over at the elementary school, middle school, a few years prior, that someone had seen a big black bear over there. But this woman insists that what she saw wasn't a black bear. It was upright the whole time on 2 legs, running very fast. And again, she didn't call it a Bigfoot, she called it a werewolf.
Dogman. Reports of these upright canids come from almost everywhere in the world, the Chestnut Ridge seemingly no exception. Whether or not the so-called arch-nemesis of Sasquatch is lurking in the shadows, or human perception is misidentifying other known creatures, remains to be seen.
I also think most Dogman sightings are misidentified Bigfoot sightings. This Dogman phenomenon is really recent. Aside from what Linda Godfrey has going on at Wisconsin, was maybe something on its own. I take a lot of flack for this because I think a lot of these Dogman sightings that are seen are just misidentified something else. It's just something else now that's gotten this attention, becoming its own sort of cultural thing, and that's what people are jumping on. Bigfoot sightings are starting to go down a little bit. Dogman sightings are starting to go up. What is it? I think you got a Bigfoot that you think is a Dogman.
So people see a variety of different things up here and have different experiences. The most common are the UFOs or strange lights, the cryptid creatures, the Bigfoot, the Dogman. There's been reports of black panthers submitted over the years and mountain lions. Strange flying creatures like thunderbirds have been seen frequently over this area and in the valleys of the ridge. The strange light phenomenon is just starting to become more and more reported in this area. I mean, we've experienced it. I've seen it myself firsthand, and we were getting more reports from other people out in the woods that are camping and hiking. The strange sounds that are reported, like booming sounds, or like a hum is heard in the atmosphere and reported around here, but we can't find an explanation for it. People have reported hearing, the only way I can describe it is like an underground factory working, where they can hear large machinery and equipment underground making noise, the ground's vibrating, they can hear the bangs, the clangs, the noise that's being heard. There's so many haunted locations up here, it's unreal. I mean, pretty much every business that I've looked into has something weird and unusual going on, whether it's a ghostly sighting or ghostly activity reported in it. I think I've collected maybe 30 or 40 locations on the ridge that have haunted experiences, ghosts, poltergeist activity reported. So as I said, it's a variety of weird phenomenon, and it just continues to go on year after year.
Yeah, I've been watching this for years, and there have been some mystery booms reported up along the ridge. One of the more recent mystery booms was December 31st of 2021. A lot of people talking about the intense boom they heard that afternoon. And I heard an audio recording of one that was recorded up in Indiana County, and it was very easy to tell how intense it was. So that's one that so far we have not found an explanation for. And in cases over the years, back in the 60s, we used to call these skyquakes. And in the years since then, these things have been occurring, over in Pennsylvania, but around the country. In more recent years, a lot more of these type reports. Even in recent months, we're hearing more recent reports. Sometimes there's explanations. So sometimes in the wintertime, if you have the right freezing condition, you might have a frost quake. So, I've been some cases around the country where they may have been attributed like a sonic boom from an aircraft. What we have had in the past is that on occasion we have a bright fireball meteor, an extra bright fireball meteor called a bolide, that at times can produce a sonic boom. So we had another case recently where the big boom that people felt and heard over quite a distance appeared to be that of a fireball meteor. So some of these are explainable, but some of these cases are not. And I've been kind of monitoring this more and more over the years and to see if there's any correlation with some of the other unusual activity going on. So far, I have not found enough data to support that.
While the origin of these monsters on the ridge is unknown, whether they come from another dimension or the dark corners of the forest, perhaps there is some reason for them to be here.
Now, one of the things we're also looking into with the Dogman phenomena, when there's an electrical storm or when we've had several sightings of these creatures going into or close to electric power substation. Do these substations give off enough energy that something could come through them? Electrical storms, energy ionization in the air. Could that cause some of these things to appear or to shapeshift?
One of the patterns I found years and years ago was that many close-range, low-level UFO sightings and many encounters with Bigfoot and other cryptids, they often occur in the vicinity of high-energy sources. So I have no doubt there's an energy connection to it. So you have many cases around high-tension power lines, power plants, radio towers, cell phone towers, gas lines, gas wells, bodies of water, railroad tracks. There's no doubt in my mind there's an energy connection, whatever we're dealing with.
Stan and I have found in a number of cases that we've investigated separately and together that sightings of especially the cryptids are taking place around gas well lines, power lines, water sources, windmill towers, cell phone towers, electrical lines. It always seems to be something that jumps out at us right away when we're investigating the territory. We'll happen to look over and see, sure enough, there's a gas well right there or a power line right there. I've had people report to me they've seen creatures standing literally on the opposite side or behind a gas well. and it's just kind of standing there, and they see it and it walks off into the darkness. It seems like an energy source. That seems to be a key component to a lot of these sightings. And if they're correlated or not, or if it's just coincidence, although there's too many to really seem like it's a coincidence. I don't know what the connection is, but there's a lot.
On State Game Lands 51, which is on the Chestnut Ridge, 4 guys, maybe 5 tops in our group. There was 3 groups, just like quarter mile apart. Eric had called down on a radio and asked if Sean or I could go up with the group that he was with because we were familiar with the area. It was a full moon, so you needed no flashlight whatsoever. Sean said, I'll go up. So he started. I watched him walk up this pipeline. And then a couple of guys behind me were hearing whoops. So I turned around and was paying attention to them. And they also had eye shine, self-illuminating. There was no light other than the moon, red eyes. And I'm concentrating on that down there. And I just happened to turn to look to see where Sean was at, and something stepped out 1 step from the wood line and was standing on the gas line. I couldn't tell if it was looking at the other group or if it was looking down at me, because all I seen was a silhouette. So I thought, well, maybe it's a deer. Well, I turned around to get the guy's attention behind me, and they were preoccupied with all the other stuff that was going on. I turned around, looked back up again, and it stepped back into the woods. So I called Sean and I asked him, I said, hey, are you at the top of the gas line? And he said, no, I've been up here for 15 minutes. So at that point, I turned around to try to get the other guy in the group's attention, Joe. I just turned around, looked back up the hill, and this thing crossed the gas line in like 4 strides. And the grass, I'm gonna say I'm 5'6", and the grass from the pipeline was up to my chest. Whatever it was about 4 feet above that grass, and it went across the pipeline on 2 legs.
The most active area that I've been to that continues to be active is an area up on the ridge in Fayette County over towards the Laurel Caverns. There is an area where they're constructing windmills and providing maintenance for the windmill towers. And in 2010, we received a report from this gentleman who was the supervisor for a night shift security team that would sit on the property to make sure that nobody stole any copper tubing or equipment or vandalized anything up there. And they reported for weeks on end that they would hear things coming from the woods, howls, screams, knocks, growls. One, for example, a guy was sitting in one of the porta-johns doing his thing in there, and he saw this huge black shadow walk by the pole light right between him and the pole light. Huge black upright form walk across the front door. He watched it, and he knows there was nobody on the property while he was there, and it freaked him out pretty good. I talked to another security guard up there who told us that he didn't believe in the phenomenon, and he thought it was all just a bunch of bunk. So sitting in his truck, he sticks his head out the window about 10:30, 11 o'clock at night and does a scream. And about 15 minutes later, something walked up behind the back of his pickup truck and roared at him, and that was enough for him to quit. He just off site and left. The security guard supervisor told us that his crew was having these almost nightly encounters. And then finally, about a week before we were supposed to go up and meet with him and do an investigation at the site, he had told us that he was sitting in his car at the very front of the construction area, and he was watching the tree line just for people coming up and down the road. And he saw what he thought was a bear at first, kind of slinking along the ground, and it went over to a pole that had a board with all the electric boxes and equipment for the different sheds and offices that were there. And he saw something stand up, and it kind of leaned out and started looking at him from behind the light pole, and he was only 75 feet away. He said he could clearly see it wasn't a bear, it didn't have a snout, it had a flat face, it had arms that hung down well past its knees, and it was kind of rocking back and forth watching him. And that was enough to convince him what was up there at the construction site. And then eventually it backed into the darkness and just disappeared. He was pretty freaked out about that. So we made it up the following weekend to meet with him and meet with some of the security guards and to look over the area, which we did. And we had our own experiences at this location. And suffice to say, that's probably the most active I've had in Area B since I've been doing this. We heard wood knocks all around us all night long. screams and howls coming from multiple locations. I heard personally something very heavy walking through the forest and breathing, and that unnerved me because it wasn't your typical just somebody with heavy breath. This was enormous. Whatever was doing this had enormous lung capacity, and it was very, very large. I wasn't the only one that heard this. We had probably a team of about 20 people up there spread out in all four corners of the construction site, and all four teams had activity reported. They were hearing all the sounds, eye shine seen.
I was of the opinion from the cases I have been investigating that we're probably dealing with an unknown primate, some type of animal that science had never confirmed. But as we're getting into these series of incidents from widespread areas, some very, very strange things begin to come to our attention. And those cases have now continued for years and years since 1973, right up to recent months and years. And the indications are that we're dealing with something that's much, much stranger than an unknown animal.
Still, we are left with more questions than answers. When the web of mystery spans this far and wide, it can be difficult to see how it all ties together, and perhaps it may not. As humans, we are pattern seekers. Our brains reward us for the patterns that we discover in the world. And maybe we're seeing a pattern that isn't there, and trying to craft a narrative that doesn't exist, or it does. And it's hiding something far more sinister.